members Isaac Bryan and Sade El-Hawari will be on hand for what promises to be a lively and informative conversation. Doors open at 8 a.m. The general session, moderated by Tavis Smiley and broadcast live on KBLA Talk 1580, begins at 9 a.m. The event is free, but seating is limited. Registration is required. Go to the Empowerment Congress website at www.empowermentcongress.org to register. Where do we go from here? Chaos or democracy? Join the Empowerment Congress and KBLA Talk 1580 this Saturday, January 25th. Doors open at 8 a.m. The free program starts at 9 a.m. Registration is required at www.empowermentcongress.org. This is a community call to action from KBLA Talk 1580. We've got your black.
Look, if you buck, why? 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 Look, if you buck, why?
J on the track.
Look, if you duck, if you duck,
hey, if you time for all the security,
look, if you
get around, it's going down.
Yeah, well I'm a tone holding on your damn street, stomping, jumping, bumping, every crunk off in this damn thing. Throwing the balls up at these soldiers, screaming and bleeding from their nose. But when we start, that's where we make them hit the flow. Ain't no game off in this thing. We be deep off in your party. Come on, get it started, and it would be the hardest. So if a come and run they matches like a punch them dead up in his nose, and stomp this down to the floor.
Yeah, we nucky and bucky and ready to fight. How bad y'all I'ma throw them dice? I hate us best to think twice. See me, y'all ain't nothing nice. It come up in the Becky like my
you are listening to the Black Pack here at KBLA 1580. And yeah, enough if you buck, because that apparently is where we are at in 2025. We're just talking about it's day four. It's day four of the Donald Trump administration, and we have seen a flurry, a bombardment of executive orders and pronouncements, and it is all designed to overwhelm us, to confuse us, to make us feel like there's so much going on that we have to tap out, to make us feel like we can't do anything about it, to make us feel otherwise isolated and on our own. And so we know that that is not true. And we're going to talk to some folks later on to, help us understand what are the things that we can and should be doing. But it's been only 4 days. And it is all that he promised that it would be. So remember back in the 2024 campaign, you all are old enough to remember this, when Trump said he didn't know what Project 2025 was, and that it had nothing to do with him. Because people were starting to research it and find out what it was about and decided that that was not the America that they wanted to live in. So he tried to disavow it, right? Well, he apparently knows what it is now and is beginning to implement it at break speed. So you all will remember that Project 2025 called for the government to militarize our border by deploying active duty troops to the southern border, and Trump issued an executive order this week doing just that. Project 2025 wanted the government to enforce the death penalty wherever possible. And just like that, there's a Trump executive order reinstating the death penalty. Now, it's a good thing that Joe Biden cleared almost all of the federal death row before he left, because otherwise we would be in a very different situation in terms of the numbers of people that would be impacted by Trump's death row executive order. Project 2025 called for the U.S. to withdraw from the World Health Organization, the people who, among other things, help to coordinate global responses to things like pandemics. Trump issued an executive order for that too. Project 2025 called for abolishing the birthright citizenship clause of the 14th Amendment. And yep, Trump issued an executive order saying that they were reinterpreting the clause of the Reconstruction Amendment. And we'll talk about why you can't just, by executive order, get rid of the 14th Amendment. We'll come back to that later in the show. Project 2025 called for the elimination of civil rights and discrimination protections, and Trump rolled out executive orders that leave us all more vulnerable to discrimination and harassment in the workplace. So to be clear, executive orders can't cancel amendments to the Constitution. They cannot magically undo long-standing policy. But what they can do and what they will do is signal to government agencies that they need to align their policies and procedures with what Trump's expectations are. So we've seen emails go out to federal employees canceling DEI programs, diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. We've seen moves to lay off employees who were working on diversity programs. We've seen folks with government contracts, and this is real time, the way that this is affecting real people. We've seen folks with government contracts to provide training and resources to ensure government employees aren't unknowingly engaging in discriminatory practices. We've seen those folks have their contracts canceled. There was a viral video going around of a woman who said she had a training scheduled and within the hour, and it was canceled, right? We're talking about folks' livelihood. This is people's money that's being messed with. Today, we heard that federal agencies are canceling Black History Month programming and Women's History Month programming and eliminating affinity groups within their agencies. But these executive orders don't just send a message across the federal government. They also send a message to the private sector about what is expected from them by our government. And so today, joining Walmart and Meta, Facebook and Instagram, and McDonald's, Target announced that it will be rolling back its efforts to ensure diversity. Target issued a memo to its employees stating it will end its 3-year diversity, equity, and inclusion goals. It will stop reporting to external groups, and it will end a program that focused on carrying more products in its stores from Black and other minority-owned businesses. But not all corporations are caving. Some folks have also probably heard that 98% of Costco shareholders this week voted to reject an anti-DEI proposal that would have forced the company to audit their programs to assess risk to the corporation. And Costco's board said the proponents' broader agenda is not about reducing risk for the company, but about abolition of diversity programs. So Costco gets it. We need to make some decisions about where we spend our money. We have all kinds of power to reject the version of America that Trump and his neo-Confederate army are trying to bring back. We can decide to spend our money with businesses that respect us, that share our value of a nation that respects diversity and strives for fairness and equity. And we can withhold our coins from businesses that don't do that. It's really that simple. So when we come forward, we're actually going to be joined by Adrianne Austin, who is the Director of Race and Economic Justice at the Center for Economic Policy Research, to discuss the economic impacts of Trump's executive orders, in part because there are some real implications for federal workers that we've seen come out of these executive orders. Federal workers where Black folks are overrepresented. And so what does that mean for us? And then later in the show, Judith Brown-Dianis from the Advancement Project Action Fund will be back to pick up on where we left off last week when Trump was just going to be coming into office. We're going to pick up where we left off last week to talk about what Trump 2.0 looks like at the end of day 4. So stay with us. We have a lot to talk about. This is the Black Pack here on KBLA Talk 1580.
You're part of the Black Pack with Adrianne Shropshire on KBLA Talk 1580. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
Imagine a Los Angeles where everyone can thrive, where communities have access to the resources they need to succeed. That's the vision of Detours Mentoring Group, Inc. They're dedicated to improving life in LA County by providing educational support, employment assistance, and spaces for community engagement. By 2050, they want LA to be the best place to connect, create, learn, live, and play. They're working toward an education system that's well-resourced and culturally responsive, becoming a hub for artists and innovators, and making sure everyone has access to healthy food, quality healthcare, and safe housing. It's about building a future where we all have the chance to succeed. We invite you to learn more about their mission and get involved with Detours Mentoring Group, Inc. This is a community call to action from KBLA Talk 1580.
A Gain Scent Bead story. Jim was at the laundromat when he heard his ear said, "Maraca, senor," but his nose said, "Hey, freshest scent ever." Following his nose, Jim found a man pouring a bottle of Gain scent beads into the washer. The scent, the freshness. Jim blurted, "Sir, your scent Maraca smell amazing." Actually, Jim, most noses call them Gain scent beads. Try Gain scent beads. Way fresher than detergent alone.
You okay?
I can't sleep with this cough.
Sounds like you need to vaporize that cold.
Vaporize?
Yeah, with NyQuil VapoCool. It's NyQuil plus a rush of Vicks vapors.
Whoa.
So you ready to get some sleep? Thank you, NyQuil VapoCool.
NyQuil VapoCool, the vaporizing nighttime coughing, aching, fever, best sleep with a cold medicine. And to vaporize sore throat pain, try Vicks VapoCool drops. Use as directed. Keep out of reach of
Hey there, Los Angeles. This is James Lucky Jr., publisher and editor of Los Angeles News Observer. Are you hungry for news that matters to you in the African-American communities of Los Angeles? Well, buckle up, because we got the scoop you've been craving. Stay in the know and never miss a beat with our free weekly publications conveniently available near you. Or hop on the digital wave and become an exclusive subscriber at OGNSC.com. Don't forget to join the party on Instagram and Twitter at OGNSCINC for behind-the-scenes access and sizzling updates. No more FOMO. Let's stay informed, connected, and empowered together.
You don't talk to me like that. You don't talk to your mommy like that.
Unlike your mama, we can handle your black talk on the Black Pack with Adrianne Shropshire.
You are listening to the Black Pack here at KBLA Talk 1580. I am your host, Adrianne Shropshire, and we have seen just a tsunami of executive orders flowing out of the White House this week, touching on so many of the campaign promises that Donald Trump made, largely campaign promises that were really the blueprint that is Project 2025, although they weren't discussed necessarily in that way. And so in addition to the sort of, what feels like the nation's retreat from things like desegregation and non-discrimination, we know that there's always an economic angle to this, and so I'm happy to be joined today by Adrianne Austin, the Director of Race and Economic Justice at the Center for Economic and Policy Research, to talk about what some of these economic implications on. So, Adrianne, I want to thank you for taking the time to join us today.
It's a pleasure to be with you. I'm really glad that you're talking about this and educating the people so well. You mentioned tsunami. It is a tsunami, so it's really excellent that you're able to break it down for the public.
Yeah, and it feels like there's going to be at least, maybe we take it in chunks, right? So there was the first 4-day tsunami. There'll be another 100 days of probably tsunamis, and then and then another year, and then 4 years, right? And so I think we have to not get caught up by every single thing that this administration does, but there are some things that we need to pay attention to. And I think that, as we've been watching and listening to the rhetoric, and some of the rhetoric is around, diversity, equity, and inclusion, which really is about civil rights. And I feel like we really need to reclaim some language about what we're actually fighting here for, right? And so when we think about, civil rights protections and discrimination protections, some of the things that we've heard about with regard to federal workers has been tied to that stuff, right? But it is the case that Black folks are overrepresented, right, in some ways in our federal workforce, and so when the Trump administration is talking about, putting a pause on hiring, and when they're talking about, potentially laying folks off, that has also then the potential for outsized impact on Black folks and Black community. And, you know, when we think about the ways in which we have moved into the middle class, having government jobs has certainly been one of those opportunities where we were able to get employment when we couldn't get it in other places. Is that the right way to think about this? Because I feel like we're about to see some real damage. Right?
Absolutely. There is real damage, and there are multiple layers to it. As you suggested, the federal government has been at the forefront of anti-discrimination in the labor market. Yeah. And the Black middle class, a significant portion of the Black middle class, and really the earliest Black middle classes, were federal employees, including, especially when you include the post office.
Right.
These are important. The sort of the first opening of equal opportunity, or as close to equal opportunity as you can get, was via the federal government. And I live in Maryland right now, and the strongest and largest, the strongest and largest Black middle class is in Maryland. And why is it in Maryland? Because these are people who work for the federal government. Right. So based on the mandate for leadership, which is connected to Project 2025, before the executive orders, I estimated that about 8,000 Black middle class jobs would be lost by if Trump came to power. So within the Washington D.C. metropolitan area, right? So that's just within the metro area. Yeah. If the administration does what it wants to do, if you just imagine that they reduce the federal government by, let's say, 5%, we're talking about the loss of over 100,000 jobs, good jobs that Black people have. Right. And that's probably a low estimate, because the agencies and the programs and the offices that they most dislike are the ones that are have disproportionate Black employees. So the Department of Education, have higher than average Black employees. Housing and Urban Development, higher than average. DEI, the people running the DEI programs are going to be disproportionately Black, and they are already basically have received notice that they've lost their jobs.
Right.
So this is a serious blow to Black America, and that's just the federal government.
Right.
Now, this administration, they want to remake America. So their so-called ending illegal discrimination executive order, and it's really ridiculous, because
say what you're going to say, because
President Johnson in 1965 said, his executive order said it's illegal for federal contractors to discriminate. And they do an executive order that nullifies Johnson's anti-discrimination executive
So
order.
we're talking about
has the gall to call it ending illegal discrimination, when in fact it's doing the exact opposite. It's saying it is now legal to discriminate on the basis of race if you're a federal contractor.
Right. So we're talking about the Equal Employment Opportunity that was the executive order by President Lyndon Johnson in 1965. Right. Like that was the thing that said you cannot discriminate against people based on race. Trump is now eliminating that. Right.
It established affirmative action, but the first part, said, look, if you're a federal contractor, if you're receiving federal, you cannot discriminate based on race, sex, religion, etc. Right. And they just eliminated that.
Right. Yes. So that was Trump. That was one of Trump's executive orders, right? Was to say that is so the provision that said you can in federal contracts you cannot discriminate against people. Trump said we're getting rid of that. Right, and then said that it was about non-discrimination. Right, just the irony of capturing and using civil rights language to actually undermine civil rights legislation. And this is stuff that we're talking about that, we often think about, when we think about diversity, equity, and inclusion, it seems like something that's very new and it's modern. And, whether or not you trace it all the way back to, or how, connect all the dots back to the civil rights movement, that's whatever it is. We're talking about the elimination of things that literally Dr. King was fighting for. In the week of Dr. King's holiday,
yes,
right,
yep. But the other thing that's really important for people to recognize about what they're doing is that they are directly putting pressure on the private sector.
Right.
So, they have authority on the federal government, but they have said they want every agency, and it's not clear what they mean by agency, but they said they want every agency to identify 9 non-government entities for investigations. So, and every agency, I don't know what that means, but it could mean, 50 different federal agencies.
Right.
And if they're each investigating 9, we could be talking about hundreds of organizations where they will have to deal with the fact that the Justice Department or whoever else will be coming after them.
Right. So just go investigate people and find something. It's McCarthyism, right? It is.
Yes. And even down to like telling federal employees, that they should seek out and spy on their coworkers to see if their coworkers is doing any DEI work.
Right, they're ratting each other out. So I think that's a point that it is important when we think about what is essentially about to be a purge, right? That federal employees are being told that they should turn in their coworkers if their coworkers are engaged in diversity activity, right? Whatever that might be.
Whatever that means. Who knows?
Who knows what that means? If they're engaged in diversity activity by another name, that they should turn their coworkers in. That is McCarthyism, right? That is finding, investigating and purging people. Yeah.
Yep, and turning, so they really want this to ripple across every single aspect of the U.S. government. Even the federal government, I've talked about the private sector, but also state and local government via education. So they're saying if any educational entity gets any federal dollars, they are also required to do the DEI purge. So your state, colleges, your local public schools, all of it.
Right.
So this is really total.
And
they're really going everywhere.
And where the definition of DEI is extraordinarily broad, right? It could be racial justice terminology. It could be economic justice. It's like the way in which it will be defined. Mm-hmm.
They also highlight environmental justice.
Right.
So
Right.
And
anything with the word
mean?
justice
What
in
does
it.
that mean?
Right. Anything that suggests that there should be some kind of equity. So I want to turn back to this question of jobs, though. I think ahead of the MLK holiday, you actually drew attention to an often overlooked point of advocacy for by Dr. King regarding subsidized jobs and economic advancement for Black workers. And you noted there is a gap in available jobs for Black workers. So it just seems to me that if we are purging Black workers, right, from government jobs that were good paying jobs that led to Black folks being in the middle class, and there is a gap in available jobs for Black workers, what does that mean, right? What is the impact of that?
Yeah, no, it's going to be quite painful. I mean, in terms of annual, I said that if it's 5% it's going to be, over 100,000. We're talking about, when you look at Black America collectively, we're talking about, hundreds of millions of dollars that will not be earned because people won't have jobs. I mean, Black people already have low employment rates, or if you flip it around, higher than average unemployment rates. Frankly, a lot of the stuff that Trump is doing is likely to increase unemployment, or likely to worsen economic conditions, and Black people are the first people fired. So, being laid off from the federal government, being purged out of the private sector, because as I said, they're going after the private sector as well as state and local government, and then if Trump does all the nonsense that he's saying, that's going to also potentially increase unemployment. So we are possibly looking at a really bad economic times for Black America generally. Black people are already have higher than average poverty rates, or more have living paycheck to paycheck. But many, hundreds of thousands of Black people are on the verge of losing that paycheck that they depend on to pay their bills every month.
Yeah. Yep. Well, it does. I mean, the juxtaposition here is I don't know, ironic or something, right? Because we were told that the election was all about the economy and how things were so bad, and that Trump was going to come in and that he was gonna make things better. But clearly, that was not the intention, or not the intention for some folks, right? And he talked about Black jobs, so maybe on the other side we'll talk a little bit about what kind of Black jobs he was suggesting that we all have if we're not going to have good paying jobs that move us into the middle class. So when we come forward, we're going to continue this conversation with Algernon Austin, the Director of Race and Economic Justice at the Center for Economic and Policy Research. We have a lot more to discuss. Stay with us.
More of the Black Pack with Adrianne Shropshire on KBLA Talk 1580 when we come forward.
I'm Amber Payton with 4 Things You Should Know with BIN News. President Trump has announced plans to sign an executive order to reform or eliminate FEMA. On his first trip of his second term, he visited North Carolina, where Tropical Storm Helene caused billions in damage last September and is set to review wildfire damage in California. Target is ending its diversity, equity, and inclusion programs, joining Walmart, Meta, and McDonald's. In a memo, the retailer emphasized adapting to the evolving landscape to support growth and serve customers. The Wisconsin National Guard's website is down to comply with President Trump's executive order banning diversity, equity, and inclusion plans in federal agencies. And Nancy Lieutenant Cologne, the first Black Army nurse, has died at 104. A South Carolina native, she broke barriers in the Army Nurse Corps, cared for troops in World War II, served in Japan and Vietnam, and later became a flight nurse in the Air Force, retiring as a major after 20 years of service. I'm Amber Payton on the Black Information Network, your home for Black News First.
Problems in Anaheim Hills, West 91 at Lakeview, an accident involving a van and a truck clearing from the fast track lanes. You have off and on reduced speeds from Weir Canyon to the 605. Heading the other direction, East 91 just before the 15 is a 2-vehicle collision on the right shoulder. Traffic bumper to bumper heading to the Riverside Interchange on the 91 East from Maple. 110 southbound just beyond Gage Avenue, a car and an SUV tangled. No lanes are blocked here.
Visit Chevrolet of Montebello for your 2025 savings. Lease a 2025 Trax LT for $238. Do it this price. APR rates as low as 0.9% on select models up to 60 months. ChevroletofMontebello.com. Together, let's drive.
At Chevrolet of Montebello.
Is this the title? This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
Interesting decision made by LeBron and his son Bronny. The NBA invited LeBron and Bronny to participate in the Skills Challenge during All-Star Weekend next month, but they declined the invitation. The NBA was hoping to promote the first father and son duo to compete in the Skills Challenge. All-Star Weekend is February 14th to the 16th in San Francisco. Bronny was also invited to play with the G League All-Stars in the Shining Stars event during All-Star Weekend. That invitation was turned down as well. LeBron will be playing in his 21st All-Star All-Star game as a starter for the Western Conference. 73-year-old Pete Carroll is the new head coach for the Las Vegas Raiders. This will be Carroll's fourth head coaching job in the NFL. Magic Johnson's Washington Commanders are one step away from the Super Bowl. The Commanders are at Philadelphia Sunday for the NFC Championship. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson. More news, opinions, and conversations when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
Now that Donald J. Trump has begun a second term as president, please join the Empowerment Congress and KBLA Talk 1580 to examine the question, where do we go from here? Chaos or democracy? At the Charles R. Drew University of Medicine and Science. This Saturday, January 25th, some of LA's top elected officials, Representative Sidney Kamlager Dove, Assembly members Isaac Bryan and Sade El-Hawari will be on hand for what promises to be a lively and informative conversation. Doors open at 8 a.m. The general session, moderated by Tavis Smiley and broadcast live on KBLA Talk 1580, begins at 9 a.m. The event is free, but seating is limited. Registration is required. Go to the Empowerment Congress website at www.empowermentcongress.org to register. Where do we go from here? Chaos or democracy? Join the Empowerment Congress and KBLA Talk 1580 this Saturday, January 25th. Doors open at 8 a.m. The free program starts at 9 a.m. Registration is required at www.empowermentcongress.org. This is a community call to action from KBLA Talk 1580. We've got your black.
The holidays can be a time of increased stress for those struggling with opioid or stimulant addiction. They can also be a time for pause, reflection, opportunity, and new beginnings. This holiday season, choose treatment and recovery, embrace the company of family and friends, and create special moments. Find a proven opioid or stimulant addiction treatment provider near you at choosechangeca.org.
Small businesses are the heart of America. But you don't have to go it alone. As the nation's largest nonprofit resource of expert business mentoring, SCORE has helped millions of entrepreneurs build their businesses for free. Get the connections, education, and guidance you need with SCORE. We're ready to help. Find a mentor today at score.org.
KBLA Talk 1580.
We've got a lot to talk about.
KBLA Talk 1580 reminds you that we keep us safe. The Live Your Life organization mentors young women, helping them break negative mindsets and see beyond their surroundings. Through career exposure and hands-on training, they're encouraged to think big, stay focused, and make positive choices. Founded by Nikisha Mama Boo Smith, who transformed her life to become a community leader. Live Your Life is changing lives, but they need your help. They're raising funds to keep their new building open and expand their programs. Your donations will support food, clothes, hygiene products, and holiday giveaways. Visit liveyourlife32.com. That's LIVEYOLIFE32.com to help today. This is a community call to action from KBLA Talk 1580.
This is KBLA Talk 1580. Talk radio that's music to your ears. We're unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. Let's get back to more of the Black Pack with Adrianne Shropshire right now on KBLA Talk 1580.
You are listening to the Black Pack, and we are in conversation with Algernon Austin, the Director of Race and Economic Justice at the Center for Economic and Policy Research, about the economic implications for Black workers with all of Trump's executive orders and rhetoric, quite frankly, right? I mean, he's releasing these executive orders, but he's also saying, you know, the same kind of unhinged things that we know that that Trump's going to say. So, Adrianne, I wanted to ask you about, over the summer, I think you co-authored an analysis of the state of the Black economy from the civil rights movement to present day. What were some of your major findings, and what is the impact of what we know now about where Trump is trying to take us, and the implications for Black folks in our communities?
Yeah, so that report highlighted that, the title is really important to get a gist of it. The title was "The Best Black Economy in Generations and Why It Isn't Enough." So on the plus side, on many measures, I measured employment, the Black employment rate reached historic highs. In terms of income, Black household income, also historic highs, wealth, historic highs, poverty rates, historic lows. All of that is great, but when you compare it to where white people are on all those measures, there's still a huge gap. So it was positive that we saw these sort of strong economic developments, but when you look at where a measure of equality would be, we're still a long way to go.
Right.
So, but now, with what the Trump administration is doing, planning to do, and the likely effect of their policies, we will see reversals of all of this. I mean, as we talked about, some of a significant number of our, some of the highest earning, and most financially secure Black people will be losing jobs. So that's going to hurt. That's going to reduce Black, the income profiles, going to reduce Black wealth, et cetera.
And there's also other proposals, right, in the works that are about cuts to Medicaid and cuts to the Affordable Care Act. There's I'm gonna stop there. I was about to throw in some other stuff, but let me stop there. I mean, because often we know that we think about our positioning in terms of our economic situations also has to include things like healthcare, right? And so when we look at what those the potential for undermining those relied upon benefits, right? That folks exactly, I guess what I said, rely on. How does that layer?
Well, we will see if all those things proceed, and we will see increases in Black poverty. We will see fewer people with health insurance coverage. We will see declines in wealth. I mean, attacks to there's talk about attacks to Social Security. The thing is that for Black people, because the Black population is a low wealth population, a significant number of Black people rely on Social Security for the majority, if not the entirety, of their retirement income. And for this reason, I often think of Social Security as the largest asset for many Black people. And the administration wants to reduce that so that they can pay for some of the tax cuts that they're going to be giving billionaires.
Right.
And people need to, make their voices heard that is not acceptable.
Right. Well, I think that's the other thing. I mean, there are these different angles, right, that we're going to feel this sort of economic pain. And again, I just want to say for the record once again that the election was supposed to be about the economy, right, and how Trump was going to come in and make things better, right? And he had his concept of plans for, healthcare and apparently everything else, right? But there's also, because we've seen him be surrounded by these billionaires, and it almost feels like billionaire is not a big enough word, right, to talk about the folks that were, sitting front row at his inauguration. And I guess we can call them oligarchs, right? Although I feel like that's a very inaccessible word. But we, that is kind of what they are. And we know that it feels a little bit like some of this, the sort of, if we're talking about, how the economy might change, right, in this era, and we really are talking about some transfer of wealth, right, not from the top, right, to the rest of us, but from the rest of us up to the top. It feels like our government is about to be fleeced, right?
Absolutely. I mean, the other people need to be aware that those oligarchs do a large amount of business with the federal government. They reap massive, millions and billions of dollars from the federal government, and then don't want to pay any federal taxes.
Right.
They were saying, let the other people pay taxes, and we will take their tax dollars and put it in our bank accounts.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it does. This is a. Help me, right? Help me understand, because it does feel like we are talking about restructuring, right, of our economy in a way that it's hard. Even I feel like the language that we have, and then the thing that I said about, it's not just billionaires, right? Like, this is something different. But the language that we have when we talk about, income, or wealth disparities or income inequality, it feels like that those gaps are just, we're headed toward an extreme version of what those gaps are.
I haven't looked at the latest measures of income inequality, but the last time we were at peaks. We were at we were in the same territory before the Great Depression. Right, there was so much, and I wouldn't be surprised if I looked at the numbers now that we have gone past our prior historical peak, and if we haven't gone past yet, we're certainly heading that way because, Trump and the crypto bros and Elon Musk, they're all fleecing the government. It's amazing because, and it's, if the federal government is, the U.S. government is a huge part of the U.S. economy, so it has a lot of money. And, people like Elon Musk, as I said, they do a large amount of business, and so does Amazon, do a large amount of business with the federal government, and they make billions doing so. Right. And then, they don't want to pay any federal taxes.
Right. Yeah, while the rest of us are paying the taxes.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, more of this conversation with Adrianne Austin, the Director of Race and Economic Justice at the Center for Economic and Policy Research, when we come forward. This is KBLA Talk 1580.
You're part of the Black Pack with Adrianne Shropshire on KBLA Talk 1580.
This is the story of the one who, as a maintenance specialist for a historic high-rise, knows that vintage charm historically needs constant attention. Which is why when it's time to upgrade turn-of-the-century mechanicals, they turn to Grainger. With easy access to 1 million-plus products and the scale to deliver when and where you need them, the right tools and supplies are never far away. So the one can keep that vintage building running like new. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
You say you'd never give in to a meltdown and never fill your feed with kid photos. You say you'd never put a pacifier in your mouth to clean it and never let them run wild through the grocery store. So when you say you'd never let them get into a car without you there, no, it can happen. 1 in 4 hot car deaths happen when a kid gets into an unlocked car and can't get out. Never happens Before you leave the car, always stop, look, lock. Brought to you by NHTSA and the Ad Council.
KBLA Talk 1580.
We've got a lot to talk about.
KBLA Talk 1580 is committed to self-care and community well-being. Walk Good LA was formed in June 2020, inspired by the Black Lives Matter movement and the beginning stages of the COVID-19 pandemic. What began as a few minutes of breath work and yoga meditation before protests against police brutality turned into a safe space for the community to heal in hard times. The immensely positive response from the community transformed the momentum into a movement. Today, Walk Good LA is a black and brown-led community wellness organization based in Los Angeles. They provide spaces for healing through community yoga classes, guided meditations, hikes, run clubs, and other activations throughout Los Angeles that attract hundreds of members weekly. With the help of Propel and Michael B. Jordan, they now have a yoga and wellness studio in Los Angeles called the Walk Good Yard. To join their mailing list and connect with healing spaces, please visit walkgoodla.org. That's walkgoodla.org. Or find them on Instagram at walkgoodla. This is a community call to action, a community call to healing from KBLA Talk 1580.
The California Crusader newspaper would like to thank all of our subscribers for their support throughout the years, proudly serving the South Los Angeles and South Bay areas for more than 40 years. The California Crusader is a multicultural, black-owned, adjudicated newspaper that focuses on providing newsworthy information to the people in our community. We're constantly looking for ways to assist businesses in our community to connect with our subscribers. We provide low-cost, effective ways to promote your business with our reasonable and affordable advertising rates. You can participate by suggesting, sharing, and submitting your stories on the California Crusader newspaper Community Share Facebook group page, or visit our website at cal-cruise-news.com. That's calcruisenews.com. Then click on the Submit Now button located on the top right corner of the homepage, or text CCN to 42828. Again, text CCN to 42828. The California Crusader newspaper, working together to build a better community for our future. Subscribe today.
You don't talk to me like that. You don't talk to your mommy like that.
Unlike your mama, we can handle your black talk on the Black Pack with Adrianne Shropshire.
You are listening to the Black Pack, and we are continuing our conversation here with Algernon Austin from the Center for Economic and Policy Research. So, Algernon, we are not going to be here forever, right? Regardless of what the last 4 days might feel like. And I said at the top of the show that it has felt like an overwhelming tsunami of bad things coming out of the White House, because it largely has been. But it also is, sort of designed to confuse people, make people overwhelmed, make people want to check out, and not engage, right? But we are not going to be here forever, and we have all kinds of power, right? We have, when you talked about the private sector, and we talked earlier about, corporations sort of walking away from a commitment to diversity, and we have the ability to use our economic power to cause people to think differently, right? We always have, right? Like when I think about what's happening right now with our federal government, I mean, they certainly are operating off of a blueprint, right, that has been used before in this country, right? This is not new what is happening, but we also have a blueprint, right? We also have overcome many things in terms of attempts to make us second-class citizens in this country. And so we do need to prepare, right, for a different day when the opening happens, when we take advantage of the opening to sort of, get the right people back into political leadership in this country. One of the things I wanted to ask you, as we look forward is, as we look forward and also taking into consideration what you said about, we were on an upward trend, right? You said the title of the study was the best black economy and why it's not enough. We were on an upward trend, not quite good enough. But when we think about moving forward, what are some of the kinds of economic shifts, right? Those shifts in economic policy that you think are most needed for sustained racial and economic justice?
Yeah, well, let me first just say a little bit about, power. Right now, the Trump administration controls the federal government, and they are trying hard to control the rest of the country.
Right.
But they do not yet control the rest of the country. And if the only way they will get control is if we let them have control.
Right.
So local government, we the people still have power over local government. We have power over state government if we have people in elected positions that are willing to stand up and do the right thing and resist the injustices that are coming from the federal government. So we should definitely be encouraging our elected officials, local and state, to do the right thing.
I would say, and people in Los Angeles know all about that right now, right? As there is this coercion happening around federal funds for assistance, disaster relief and assistance from these fires. So, everyone should take note, right, that Trump and others within the Republican Party, if we still even call it that, have been saying, if California wants federal money, to help with disaster relief, then they've got to change their policies. But note that those policies aren't about disaster relief or climate crisis, right? Trump said today, if California wants, federal money to help with the wildfires, they need to change their voting policies, right? Changing, restricting who has access to the ballot does not put out wildfires. That's not how it works, right? So demanding that states, trying to coerce state officials and local officials into doing what they want to implementing their agenda in order for the federal government to help its own citizens is where we are. But to your point, we can still double down, right, in the places where we are, at our local government, at our state government, our county governments, to make sure that those folks who are there are the folks who are going to represent our best interests. Yeah,
and back to your other question about what we need to do. So unfortunately, we are back in the 1960s. And we have to learn from the civil rights movement. We need organizational bases. The civil rights movement was based in the black church. The black church still exists, but there are also other organizations, that we can turn to. If they don't exist, we need to build them. We need strong leadership and direction. And let me just say, yes, we need to reconstruct affirmative action. Let me just mention one thing. So with the ending of affirmative action, there was an exception, right? It's like, except people don't realize, but affirmative action actually can apply to a whole long range of different groups,
right?
Including veterans.
Right.
And they said affirmative action is bad, it's harmful, it's discrimination, it undermines the strength and the health of the nation, except none of those apply for veterans. Affirmative action is good if it's veterans, it's bad if it's anybody else.
Right.
Okay, explain that. Anyhow, but we do need, I think one of the problems with the sort of in the civil rights movement around affirmative action is that the movement allowed allowed the opponents to define it. So they defined it as racial preferences.
Right.
When in fact, in reality, the preferences in American society are for white people. Right?
Yep.
I can show you a dozen studies where they put an equally qualified white person and a similarly qualified black person, and the employers selected the white person.
Right.
That is a white preference.
Right.
Because they have the same qualifications.
Right.
But the employer had a white racial preference.
Right.
But we allowed it to be flipped around and say that the preference was for the black person. No, it's not.
Right.
The affirmative action is against white racial preferences. It's not a black preference.
Right.
It's against white race. And because we allowed it to be redefined, we have the American people thinking that, oh, these programs give black people a special advantage. No, they are anti-discrimination programs. They are trying to provide equal opportunity, not a black advantage.
Right.
So the civil rights movement and I think the left more broadly needs to really make sure that they don't let their opponents define what they're doing. And I see that, unfortunately, happen too much.
Yes. I mean, I think that there is a lot of language, right? We're seeing that right now where I think the use of the term DEI, right, is one of those things where I feel like there's that what you're describing is it has been allowed to be defined otherwise, right, from what is intended to do.
And I'll give you a specific example in the executive order. So when they're talking about DEI, they say it's illegal discrimination programs and preferences. And again, I was just talking about veterans. When they talk about veterans, they say, "Oh, this is lawful preferences."
Right.
So DEI is illegal discriminatory preferences. Veterans, affirmative action for veterans, they always put the word lawful in front of it.
Right. Right.
So they are, they're carefully messaging.
Right.
The language, and the left really needs to be attentive to that. And again, do not let them define you, because they're going to define you in a way that will make the public turn against whatever you're doing.
Right. And there is, again, I think we had said this earlier in the conversation, that we are talking about attacks on civil rights, right? We're talking about resegregation, right? We are talking about attacks on non-discrimination protections, right? Like this is what we are talking about, and we need to make sure that we are defining and using the language. I also just want to hit on one thing before we wrap that you said about having power and the importance of engaging, like how important community is right now, and engaging in our organizations, finding a base, returning to those institutions that helped us, gave us the space to organize and to strategize and actually put our plans into action. That's so important, and I'm glad that you raised that in the context of this conversation. So Algernon Austin, Director of Race and Economic Justice at the Center for Economic and Policy Research, I want to thank you so much for joining us. And
it's been a pleasure, and thank you for what you're doing. It's so important right now.
No, thank you. I was going to say, and I am definitely going to make sure that you come back and help us to continue to understand what is happening. So appreciate you taking the time. When we come forward, we'll have Judith Brown Dianis from the Advancement Project Action Fund with us to talk a little bit more about what we saw this week. This is KBLA Talk 1580. You are listening to the Black Pack.
KBLA 1580 Santa Monica.
I'm Amber Payton with 4 Things You Should Know with BIN News. President Trump is planning to issue an order to overhaul or eliminate FEMA, calling it a disaster. During a visit to hurricane-hit North Carolina, he urged states to take over disaster response. South Carolina crews are preparing for rain this weekend, focusing on protecting burn areas from mudslides and toxic runoff. Black Mayor Karen Bass issued an executive order to speed up cleanup and mitigate fire-related pollution. Black Newark, New Jersey Mayor Ras Baraka is outraged over an ICE raid at Ocean Seafood